Welcome back to ESBR Boxing's YouTube channel. Delighted as always to be joined by our Polish colleague Kasper, as well as Paul Kelly as always. Kasper, we spoke to you about a year ago for the Lawrence Okoli Michael Cieslak fight. This time we are talking about Richard Riakporhe versus Głowacki, which is another English versus Polishman fight. Thank you for your time again. Really appreciate it. It's great to talk to somebody other than Paul about boxing, although Paul's company is fantastic as it usually is. How are things where you are?
Yeah, I'm fine. Thanks for the invitation, guys.
Yeah, good. Paul, all good with you?
Yeah, all good, all good. Looking forward to
Good,
another
good,
video.
good. Good stuff, good stuff. So, yeah, this fight is on the undercard of Chris Eubank Jr. versus Liam Smith in Manchester in a couple of weeks' time. We were talking off camera a bit about Głowacki's performance versus Lawrence Okoli, which was 2 years ago. I know kind of it was kind of seen as a not a competitive fight, not the great fight we want to see. Kasper, looking back at that fight, did you have higher expectations for Głowacki than what we witnessed?
Maybe a little bit, but not so much. That was a bad style matchup for Krzysztof Głowacki. That was my opinion at that time. Michael Cieślak, Michał Cieślak, as we call him, we saw him as a much better fighter at that time when they fought last year. But now Głowacki is older. He's on the. That's probably his last big fight if he don't win it. And I don't see any way how he could win a fight with a fighter like Richard Riakporhe, who is so fresh, who is getting better. I think it's just about style matchup for Głowacki.
Yeah, Richard Riakporhe, to be honest, had a very impressive year last year. Came up against a couple of good fighters, Fabio Turchi being one of them, Dion Juma being another one. Both ends in KO victories to Richard Riakporhe. Do you think this is Głowacki's possibly his last fight? I know was 36 years old, but do you think this is kind of the last kind of hurrah, the last kind of hope in his career?
Yeah, that's probably it. That's a big fight that he wanted. He pushed his promoter into getting a fight like that, and so he wanted this one last throw of the dice, as we may say. But is he ready? I'm not sure. I think there's a lot of wear and tear in Głowacki. I think he's had more injuries than fights during the last like 3 or 4 years. So that may be it. That may be it. Yes, that's a bad style matchup for him, and I expect that Richard Riakporhe, who is experienced against Southpaws, that's the third time in a row that he will face someone like that. And I don't see any way in which he could be troubled by this version of Krzysztof Głowacki.
Yeah, we shall see. Yeah, more injuries than fights doesn't sound good. So we'll see how this one ends up. Paul, interested to get your thoughts on this one. Riakporhe looks like he could possibly fight for a world title this year. But Głowacki is a test for him and one of the better fighters he's come up against. He's not had bundles of fights in his career. What are your general thoughts on this fight?
Yeah, I think Casper's hit the nail on the head. I do think that stylistically, this fight is all wrong again for Głowacki. Obviously, you saw him against the Okoli being a massive cruiserweight as well. Riakporhe 6'5" himself. So that'll be a struggle for Głowacki, especially at this stage of his career. Think that it's probably fair to say that he is slightly on the decline. Obviously, he's done amazing things in his career, has some really credible wins, but I think, when he came over to fight Okoli, it was the kind of an element of the unknown. We didn't know how good Okoli was at the time. I thought that could have been a tough fight, and obviously it ended up being very one-sided before the stoppage in the sixth. And now looking at that fight, you can draw a lot of comparisons to how I think this fight will go. I think Riakporhe and Okoli aren't that dissimilar, in size and stature. And I think that, yeah, I think Riakporhe will finish this fight probably in the first half to the middle rounds, maybe. I don't see it going past 7 or 8, really. And I don't mean to be disrespectful at all or anything to Głowacki, but I just can't see any world in which he wins here. I think Riakporhe's coming up and he's getting better every fight, and Głowacki's just slowly declining. So yeah, I mean it's a really good name if Riakporhe is to win. It's a good name to have in his record and a good tough test on paper before he does perhaps get a world title shot next. But yeah, I think it'll end up being a routine victory for Richard Riakporhe.
Yeah, interesting. I think those comparisons are going to be made from a British point of view. Obviously, Głowacki went 6 rounds with Okolie. I think you're going to have some people who want Riakporhe to get that victory before the 6th round. But no, like I think Riakporhe needs to take this test seriously. He had a fantastic year last year, but he might not be facing the best version of Krzysztof Głowacki, but will still kind of need to turn up. He's still in a division where people hit very hard, so it's going to be an interesting one on a big stage as well. Kasper, we've had a prediction from Paul there. If you had to give a prediction for this fight, what do you think it's going to be? What's going to happen? How's it going to end?
Well, Głowacki is saying that his only chance is to make it a brawl, to make it a street fight, and that's probably true. But I don't see a way in which his current version can bump with Richard Riakporhe and end up winning that fight. So he's probably he will fight more aggressively than against Okolie. And the one thing that changed between those fights is his coach. He's now working with Andrzej Licik, who is, by the way, the same coach that guided Cieślak against Okolie. So he is like number one coach, I think, in Poland right now. But Głowacki's biggest success they were because his work with Fyodor Łapin, his previous coach, who is not there anymore. So that's the first big test of Głowacki and Licik, and that's a tall order to beat Richard Riakporhe at 36 with so many injuries. I don't see that happening. I think that Riakporhe will end this fight like mid-rounds stoppage, possibly by the body shot. I think his body shots are much better, and he's, by the way, he's a fighter that we know about in Poland because he was here in 2017 to spar with Mateusz Masternak, and he's had like 3 or 4 pro fights back then, and he was really impressive, and he really held his own against Masternak, who was a top player in the Cruiserweight division, and still is. He's waiting for his title shot against Jay Petaya. But back then, Riakporhe was pretty impressive. Now he's much better, and I don't see any way how Głowacki can surprise him. Anyway, I don't see that happening.
Yeah, appreciate your honesty. I think there are some people on this call who will back certain people from their own country to the death, but you don't seem like you're one of these people. Kasper, just want to kind of like delve into what you're saying a little bit more now. You mentioned Masternak there, Mikhail Cieślak as well. Głowacki is in the conversation as well. Who is the best Polish cruiserweight now? Who do you think?
It's between Masternak and Cieślak, but Masternak he won his last fight, and that was a title eliminator. His opponent wasn't a guy like from top 10 or top 15, but he was a decent-looking guy, unbeaten. He was tough. They went 12 rounds, and Masternak ended up winning convincingly. And I think that he has to be number one at this moment because Cieślak, he lost his last big chance. And he got 2 more wins since then, but if I'm being honest, it's between Masternak and Cieślak. It comes to your preference probably, but Masternak, I think he's waiting for his last big fight, and he will be ready to bring on 100% of his abilities, and we can wait for that because his career is not, well, we might say it's weird because he is a top guy for a long time, but the title shot never materialized for him somehow. But it should change this year.
Interesting, yeah. Well, obviously, we're aware of Masternak in this country when he fought Tony Bellew, but that was a few years ago. So I feel like our knowledge of Polish cruiserweights in this country isn't too bad. We'll leave it at there, gents. I feel like we're all diving into the same way. We're not getting a kind of an argument over who's going to win this fight. I feel like we're all pretty confident. But Kasper, Paul, Thank you very much for joining me. It's been great to look into this. Richard Riakporhe versus Krzysztof Głowacki on the undercard of Chris Eubank Jr. versus Liam Smith in Manchester, January 21st. Thank you very much for your time, gents.
Thanks a lot.
Yes, cheers.